and go right in to hearing about active work in two different bioregions. Um, and so we'll be here for an hour with an option for folks to stay afterwards if the conversation feels really alive and you want to stay. But we will give a chance for the folks who want to hop off at the hour to do so. Um, so, Sam, I just want to toss it to you to see if there's any welcoming words you want to share, anything.
Yeah, thanks, Tyler. Excited to see so many friends here today and some new faces too. We really enjoyed the welcome call a couple weeks ago, and today marks the first field building call. And we're going to start running these field building calls every month, where we'll get to hear from a couple of projects that are wanting to get feedback from the BioFi community, from the BioFi project team, and we'll get to hear what they're up to, their asks of us and potential offers to share what they're learning. And we have two really great presenters today, which I'm excited to hear from. Greg from the Greater Tkaronto Bioregion, also known as Toronto, Canada, and Cheryl from Salmon Nation. And Cheryl's working across a few different places in Salmon Nation. And both of them are working on venture studios. So today is kind of a venture studio focused day, and we're really excited to hear their presentations and just discuss what venture studios could look like. And I think we're going to have a brief breakout group before we get into presentations. Is that right, Tyler?
That is right. So we're going to have 10 minutes of just very quick getting to know each other a little bit, building some new relationships that we can take offline and in future calls. But then we'll return at about 9:15 and begin with a 10-minute presentation from Greg. We'll do about 5 minutes of Q&A just for Greg's presentation. And then we'll switch over to Cheryl, hear from Cheryl for 10 minutes, do 5 minutes of Q&A, and then wrap up as a group holding both conversations, seeing what wants to emerge for the remainder of the call. Greg, I'll give you a heads up when you're about 8 minutes in the chat.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Tyler. So you can hear me and you can see a screen sharing here. So what I'm going to share today is it's a kind of a vision presentation that I've prepared to frame conversations that I've been having lately. I've been holding this, sort of incubating the seed of an idea here for a couple of years. And, it's really exciting that BioFi and the book that's recently come out is really giving shape, giving name, giving language, and, sort of a framework really for understanding and explaining this. I came to this after, I'll just tell you just a little bit about myself briefly here. After my career, which is ongoing as a sort of a design consultant. Right now, I work at a large consultancy. And prior to that, spent about 10 years as a co-founder running a smaller agency. And I've been working on systemic change for many years, and really, I'd say in the last few years, come to the realization that the kind of change that needs to happen is not going to happen within business. And, stating the obvious probably to the community on this call here, but really finding the regenerative economy as a kind of a key lever to build a new economy outside of the dominant economy. So again, probably a shared insight for many of us here. So I've been weaving through different networks for many years, done the Regenesis training, did that a few years ago, and other groups. And so excited to kind of weave in and connect in here. So what I'm going to share is, again, perhaps in the context of this community, something that I'm stating the obvious, but this is a conversation starter presentation with it's about 8 or 9 slides, just some light content that kind of frames the narrative as I've seen it. I have not woven in content from the book. This presentation was prepared prior to the book coming out. So, it's pretty much aligned and echoes and mirrors a lot of what's in the book. But I'm just going to spend about, let's say, 5 or 6 minutes kind of going through some of this content and then landing on questions. And really, I have a lot of questions and a lot of, many more questions and answers on how to get this vision going. So, okay, jumping in here, as we all know, we need to get our economy aligned with nature's rhythms. Current economy is not working. I'm not going to say too much more about that with this group. Um, the concept of the accelerator is to grow a network within the greater Tkaronto bioregion that heals ecology and strengthens communities. I'm just going to go quickly through it because I know many of us are familiar with these concepts. So the way that the venture accelerator is being framed is, first of all, with the intention of unlocking labor and financial flows. And the labor concept is, so many of us are stuck in paying the bills through jobs in the extractive economy, corporate jobs, and even I'll say kind of nonprofit jobs where we're sort of under resourced. So one concept here is really to grow a thriving, flowing financial flow and economic flow and resource flow into regenerative work, and allow people to grow the businesses that they have or start new businesses and quit their day jobs kind of thing and really invest more wholesomely and fulsomely in the regenerative work at the community level. So that's kind of a maybe a macro view on the objectives here. The goal is to start a network of small to medium, or not start, but support a network of small to medium-sized businesses, helping with financial resourcing, helping with education, helping with kind of establishing a cooperative network within the bioregion. And this is in partnership with existing networks. We're lucky in Toronto. I saw Penny on the call from the Design School for Generating Earth. Penny and Joe have been here quite a few times working with Brian Pupa and Susan Bozak of the Legacy Project. So within Tkaronto, we've kind of got a head start, which is amazing thanks to the work of this group and others. And so, this concept here that I'm sharing would plug into work that's already underway. So not starting from scratch here, but still a lot of work to do, a lot of work on partnerships, a lot of work on really defining what is a regenerative business model. How do you help businesses transition from maybe somewhat of an extractive business model or model that relies on cheap resources, labor, and ecological inputs? How do we shift that? How do we monitor impact and then tell the story and grow the network and grow awareness? So just I guess a summary of some of the key activities. The venture accelerator we see sitting in a kind of a larger system. So with on the one hand, of course, bridging in a way between funders on the left there. These could be foundations, government agencies, philanthropists, etc. And then on the right is the Regenerative Business Network and the Wisdom Council of Advisors. And so the venture accelerator would kind of sit in the middle there, bridging resources from funders, but also I think enabling the Regenerative Business Network through cooperative exchange of resources, through maybe setting up an online kind of a community or DAO to eventually drive towards self-governance of resources and of shared resources across the network, et cetera. So really sitting in and acting as a bridge and kind of an enabler in that network. Types of enterprises, and still kind of growing this list, and also what I'm in the process of doing is just mapping this to actual organizations in the region, because right now it's just categories really, but open to feedback here. What enterprises are we looking at that can drive, I guess, value or impact into ecological renewal and regeneration, as well as social and community well-being? And so just some examples here. Manufacturing. I'm quite curious about the idea of manufacturing and kind of decoupling from the global supply shed or supply chain. And how do we establish more local regional manufacturing? What does it even look like, a regenerative manufacturing? So I know some folks in the network are working a lot on that, but I'm curious about that. Water management, forestry, obviously agriculture. So some of the areas there. Measurement, obviously a big question. Financial viability. The organizations within the network here would need to be financially viable. There's quite a bit of debate and discussion that I've been having, and others perhaps as well, just around like, how do you what kind of financial growth metrics, just purely financially, what kind of growth targets and objectives do we want to be setting within the network here? We don't want to be doing the 10x thing, the Silicon Valley kind of approach, venture capital approach. We don't want to be doing that. But what do we want to do? What is sort of viability? How do we define that? Is it about you know, being basically break even, like being a financial, you know, you're putting in X dollars of investment and that almost like an endowment is sustaining itself over time. Is that viable, or is 2, 3, 5% growth viable? So I guess it depends on all these. So this is something questions I have around, you know, how do we define the financial viability of an organization? And then of course we're measuring other things as well in a kind of a multidimensional evaluation of impact. And of course, you know, within Tkaronto, many other bioregions, many folks here on this call are part of this network, setting up a kind of an infrastructure. And I think that's what this group is doing here, starting to do around exchanging learnings, sharing strategies, frameworks, toolkits, stories. You know, maybe this deck will inspire people in some way on how to tell the story, and I'll learn from others on this. But, you know, really about working within the network of the bioregion, but also beyond. This is a kind of a high level concept of how I see things starting, and I'm kind of pre-startup here. I'm sort of in my day job, but looking at how to, you know, transition into this. You know, I see myself spending about 6 months kind of figuring things out, getting funding, refining the strategy. You know, as you can see here, many more questions and answers, but a lot of discussions, a lot of engagement, and a lot of, you know, putting meat on the bone kind of thing. Spending a few months after that, month 7 to 9, let's say, starting to really engage folks on the team. And I have a preliminary sort of list, which I'll share in a moment, of what kind of roles I see on the organization, but that would also be validated in the first few months. And then getting to a pilot. So, you know, fairly quickly, the goal is to get engaged in the community with, let's say, 1, 2, 3 businesses. Maybe 1 or 2 of those might be existing, and 1 or 2 of those might be sort of new in startup mode, and running a pilot of, you know, so getting first round of sort of educational resources, first round of funding, getting those agreements in place, and for a few months, and, you know, the timeline may evolve here, but spending a few months really on that first pilot. So by the end of year 1, there's good learnings, there's a team in place, there's relationships with funders, and ready to kind of iterate and refine from there. Do I see a hand up from Tyler?
You do. You see my hand, and that's
Great.
the hand to tell you that you're at 10 minutes. And so if there's any
At
kind
10
of
minutes?
wrap up, yeah.
Oh, that went quick. Okay. So let
It
me
does.
just wrap up here. Some of the roles that I had in mind on this, I'm going to wrap up in about 1 minute. Roles on the team, you know, finance expertise, partnerships. Like there's so much to do here. Part of what boggles my mind and where I'm curious to tap the community here is like working at a system scale, you could be doing so much. You're building relationships, you're shaping strategy, you're working with several businesses on the ground. It's kind of like, you know, obviously you need a team to do this, but where to focus, where to prioritize, you know, to have impact at system scale, but just be, you know, there's only so many hours in a day. So this is some of the roles and functions that I see in the organization. Really, this is an invitation, you know, that I've been using this deck for people to join. And I have just 2 slides here of questions, you know, questions I have around identifying, you know, who are the right funders and what are those agreements, who are the right fundees, and what support do they need really. And I would see some prototyping needed here, like, you know, I conceptually learning resources and support getting to regenerative business models, testing those, iterating those. And that's where my background as a designer comes in, because I do a lot of work with prototyping and sort of rapid cycles of build, measure, learn in the field with real prototypes. So really taking a prototype driven approach, but, you know, starting off with some assumptions that then can be tested, and then more questions around what really is a regenerative business model. How do we know when it is that? What are the investment and granting vehicles just from a financial perspective? Obviously, understanding the stakeholders in the bioregion. And then the last question is just around livelihood, is like, how do we as regenerative finance practitioners support our families and, you know, transition into this work and have ourselves be thriving and supported in that way? So some questions to share. That's all.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Greg. Really appreciate the thoughtfulness you put into all these questions. I think that'll help us have a rich conversation. We've just got, you know, 3 minutes here before we transition over to Cheryl, and so I want to open it up to everyone in the group And maybe Samantha, if you have a starting question to go for it, but know that we'll have time at the end as well to all converse.
Yeah, maybe just a couple of quick reflections. This is so exciting, Greg. It's really fun to hear what you're dreaming up. Yeah, one question is like, what kind of legal entity are you looking at? Um, are you connected to a broader bioregional regeneration strategy? And are you using that to identify which organizations the venture studio would fund and, then to extrapolate the returns that they could provide based on the organizations that are the first priority in implementing the bioregional regeneration strategy. One person that was coming up as you were speaking is Cordell Jacks. I know he's working on some similar aligned work in your bioregion, and I think it could be good to connect with him. And the question of funders, yeah, we're doing some research right now looking at different foundations that are interested in funding this type of work. And we're going to be developing a database that we hope to make available for the community to see, who's funding bioregional work in which bioregions and, what their focus is. And that's something that, perhaps we can co-create together. And I think in your bioregion, Greg, there are a lot of financial resources. So, looking at who the family offices and foundations are in that bioregion that you can bring along on the journey with you. That's where I would start. I see Pearl, there are a couple of questions in the chat. Do folks just want to come in with their voice?
Sure, I can jump in. I was just curious about that part, Greg, about the blending of Indigenous knowledge. And we're kind of looking at how do we do that in our bioregional work too, and just curious of any examples or wisdom you might have and how you've gained the right relationship with Indigenous knowledge holders or blending that technology for investment, anything you've got there.
I've had experiences and conversations, I would say, in that network, but lots of work yet to do to establish trusting relationships and build my own knowledge and integrate that more fulsomely. Right now, like most of my project, that's really a vision. It's a concept. Still yet lots to do to actualize it, but I think there's been some amazing. I've just I know there's a lot going on in my bioregion. There's a lot of folks I need to get to know. Thanks, Pearl.
Greg, I wonder if you've thought about using a DAF as a kind of nimble way to start this venture studio, a donor advised fund.
Can you tell me more?
They can be used to make investments as well as donations, and they're tax free. So yeah, I'll send in the chat a little overview of DAF FAQs that a friend of mine, Andrew Hewitt, put together. But we do say in the book that DAFs can be a kind of easy entry point for bioregional financing facilities. Ethan, go ahead.
Oh, hi, Ethan.
Hey, Greg, good to see you.
Nice to see you.
And thank you for that. That was a really cool initiative. As I've been mapping activities in my own bioregion and even more kind of focused on my own watershed, there's a lot of existing organizations that already provide this, are doing amazing activities, provide the middle layer between funders and those activities. And meet many of like the kind of like local economic kind of areas that you defined there. And so I think, and even local groups who are, interested in putting together all the pieces, just like many of us on this call are, many associated with Brandon and everything in Regenerate Cascadia. Curious how you're incorporating this kind of like existing network of organizations into the development of this venture lab as you move forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think in Tkaronto, I'll point to Brian and Susan of the Legacy Project, and I spoke to Brian a few weeks ago. I also spoke to Cordell Jacks last week, but They've done a lot of work of mapping. There's a map actually that Brian shared with me that he said they were still working on. So I'm not going to share it today with the group, but there's mapping initiatives underway, and I think just through that relationship and some of the relationships in there's a kind of a small but mighty community of regenerative practitioners and folks who are trying to engage in the work in the region. So through conversations, we've gotten together a couple times and just trying to learn and stay connected to these networks.
Wonderful. Thanks for the questions,
One thing I
everyone.
will mention is just as a kind of a strategy that I'm trying to engage is essentially to get funding, perhaps from a government agency, for kind of a research project, kind of a 6 to 8 month research grant that would enable me to probe a lot of the questions around, who are the, validating some of the questions around who are the funders, who are the fundees, what are the different mechanisms, just to enable me to kind of have more time to have those conversations. So I'm looking at, I'm in discussion right now with a federal government group in Canada around potential funding for a kind of what I'm calling a feasibility review and kind of a strategic report, and would do some co-creation work with this agency as well. So that's a kind of a mechanism that I'm exploring just to fund the initial kind of startup work.
Great. Thanks so much, Greg. Really appreciate all the questions, everyone, as well. Keep them flowing in the chat, and we'll do our best to always share out the chats afterwards along with the recordings. So please don't feel like you need to be tracking everything here and taking your own notes. But yeah, would love to transition it over to Cheryl, make sure we have time for questions there and a group discussion at the end. So thanks again, Greg. And Cheryl, are you able to share?
Yeah.
Great.
Does that look like it's working? Awesome.
Looks great.
Well, yeah, firstly, I just want to thank the host team for creating this space. Just from the onset, it's felt really sweet and supportive. So thanks so much for creating this platform for all of us. And yeah, just a little bit about me. My parents are immigrants from Taiwan, from farming and fishing families, and they moved to the United States in the late 70s and eventually made their way to the US West Coast. So I grew up amongst the oak tree foothills and the redwood forest of California and what's known as the Bay Area. But I now call the temperate rainforest of the lower Columbia River my home, called Portland, Oregon. So that's where I'm calling from right now. Let's see. Oops. Move my slide. But yeah, early on in my career, I started working at EcoTrust up in Portland, Oregon in 2007. And I fell in love with it and went full on Portland. I raised backyard chickens, grew up a garden, brewed my own kombucha, baked my own bread, joined a craft group, did the whole Portland thing, and just fell in love with the forests and rivers and lakes of this area. And at EcoTrust, it was one of the first nonprofit organizations that was created to support a bioregion. And the bioregion, we called the bioregion salmonation. So essentially, salmonation is the traditional extent of wild Pacific salmon in North America, from central California down here at the bottom, all the way up to the north slopes of Alaska up here. And so salmonation is a place. It's also not an idea as written in this slide, but it's also kind of a state of mind. It's living in a way that centers that we're all connected as a people. When so much of the world is trying to tear us apart, our love for home and common dependency on this place for life, just as salmon depend on it for life, is what brings us together. And so salmonation is the name of the bioregion, but it's also a family of people, organizations, and companies working to better this bioregion. So EcoTrust, as I mentioned before, it was founded in 1991 by Spencer Beebe. And then in 2019, Spencer and I and two other people, Ian Gill and Chris Bookfield, started Salmonation Trust. And it's a sort of bioregional trust, as kind of referred to in the BioFi book. And then in 2020, me and Ian Gill started the Magic Canoe. It's a nonprofit storytelling vehicle and basically kind of a public invitation to the Salmonation bioregion. The Magic Canoe is a story gifted to us by a Haisla First Nation elder, Cecil Paul, to carry on his legacy. And he used the story of the magic canoe to save his home territory in the Kitlope, which is up in the British Columbia area, to save it from logging. And he said that the canoe gets bigger as more people join, and soon it can hold all of us as we paddle in the same direction. And so it's a really beautiful story that we're able to carry forward to invite people into this bioregion. So anyways, because of this history, we have the honor of developing lots of deep relationships in this bioregion over several decades. And so now, since I can't help myself starting new things, I started a new venture, or a venture studio as referred to in the BioFi book, called Salmonation Collabs. And so what is it? It's sort of a collaboratory. It's a space where we can explore collaborative innovations. You can think of it as a collaboration accelerator, but really at its core is the question of how do we catalyze community self-determination? How do we support local people, those rooted in place, to steward the land and resources that sustain their lives? And really our catalyst is finance. The value add that we're hoping to bring is, money is energy. So how do we strategically weave collaborations, place some initial supports and investments to liberate the flow of financial resources to people on the ground, making the change that we want to see. And so there's a strategy behind this. It's sort of not just a thrown together set of projects. When we ask ourselves, how do we regenerate this bioregion? And I say, we follow the rivers. The rivers give us life, and we follow the salmon. They will show us the way. And so we focus on the major river basins of this bioregion, which I'll show you a couple of those in a little bit, and develop portfolios of fundable projects and investable ventures. But there's a lot that goes into developing a portfolio, and I'll get to that when I talk about process. But first of all, I wanted to show you guys some of these major river basins. So here's the Columbia River Basin. For those who are not from this area, this is the Canada-US borderline. It flows from Canada into the US. This is Washington, this is Oregon, this is Portland, where I live right here. And so this river basin really defines a huge majority of area. We refer to the Pacific Northwest in this area. And I used to be home to the largest Chinook salmon run in the world. And its headwaters comes from essentially the Canadian Rockies. And I'll talk a bit about the Okanagan region here, where we have a project going on that's really exciting that feeds into the larger Columbia River Basin. But you can see in looking at this river basin, when you think like a river, you can see it's all connected. And the yellow dots here are the current dams on the rivers. You can kind of imagine being a salmon trying to get all the way up to the Okanagan. It's kind of a gauntlet you got to run. It's amazing that they make it up there. But this is just one example of a river basin we're working in. And then right here, down here is the Klamath Basin. The Klamath River Basin is having the largest dam removal project in the US history right now. Some of the most rural and remote places left in California, defined by salmon, defined by redwood trees. No salmon have been able to get past this Iron Gate Dam since the 1960s, since this Iron Gate Dam was built. And these two dams are in the process of being torn down right now. Hopefully will be finished by the end of this year. So it's a great time of renewal in this watershed and celebration. And with Collabs, I'm investigating what could further regenerate this incredible river basin look like. So we're figuring out, learning more about what folks are doing here and meeting different people and yeah, learning and listening and seeing how we can support. So that brings me to process. So there's a process we're starting to follow, and I'll use sort of our work in the Okanagan region, which is part of the Columbia River Basin, to illustrate. So the Okanagan River Basin is at the confluence of two watersheds that feed the Fraser River and the Columbia River Basin. So it's a really ecologically important area. It's also the food basket of British Columbia. And it also is a place where there's starting to be a group of regenerative farmers cropping up. British Columbia is really geared towards industrial agriculture. And so there's these people wanting to do things differently. They're wanting to take care of the land, feed local people with good food. And there is community cohesion happening and not just with farmers, but along the whole entire food system. So there's innovators working in aggregation, distribution to the urban hubs, branding and local markets. So there's really kind of the conditions of possibility there in terms of doing a end-to-end food system transformation. And so kind of in these first bullet points, we have found that there is social cohesion. There's these islands, what I call islands of possibility, these different people along the food system that are doing really innovative stuff. And there is potential to connect them in a strategic way. This is kind of a graphic that shows that I took from a study that shows a systems approach to investment. So, we've got food infrastructure work happening here. There's opportunities to purchase land and real estate. There's community capacity and innovation in terms of, people are wanting to create innovation hubs. How do you create learning and exchange? And so really here is how do we kind of create a portfolio that is connecting all these different pieces together to really do systems transformation using finance in this food system in the Okanagan. So, so really what we're trying to do here is to make these opportunities legible and coherent to funders and investors and really target de-risking entry into the regenerative food system, as well as looking at the whole, what are the wraparound investments needed to keep regenerating the people, ideas, innovation, and cultural identity in this region. So it's not just, what's happening now, how do we sort of keep it all flowing into the future as well, so that more people can enter into regenerative farming or get into regenerative food system. And so really the process is starting with local people, building upon existing and help weave further trust and cohesion, and put a little money in to energize and support those people. Because that's often a really big gap, is how do you start from nothing to something and get an idea cohered to then actually ask for funding. And so that's a gap we're looking to fill. And really try and cohere that investment portfolio so that it's not just a single project that needs funding, it's a project that's going to feed into a larger strategy to really flip, for example, in the Okanagan, a food system in a certain watershed. And then, of course, bringing diverse capital stack to the table to match make to those different opportunities. And of course, all along the way is plugging into the larger community practice around bioregional finance, like we are right now, to inform how to find sort of the pattern language in all of this, like building the metastructures and wraparound investments to further evolve and adapt this initial strategy and process for endeavoring upon, because we're going to learn a lot from working with people on the ground in terms of, how do we develop these portfolios? How do we create these relationships? How do we make them legible? But then sort of from the meta level, what are kind of the structures there that we can plug into, and how can we kind of learn from each other to really flow finance down to the people that are rooted in place and stewarding the land and these watersheds. So that's it for me. Was that 10 minutes? Oh, wow. I thought I was going to go on forever, but that's me. And here's
a little
information
but
to let me I would love to connect with anybody who wants to talk more about this, because we're really just starting out with collabs, and just love talking about it with people and also learning how to talk about it with people. So always open to connecting.
Incredible, Cheryl. Edward, I'd love for you to respond to this one, since you are so close to this project.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's the right words to say? I mean, I think this is just a really exciting evolution of this broader journey that we've all been on at discovering how to weave these networks and and bring these threads into this extraordinary tapestry. I think Cheryl, you and I have known each other for some years, and it's feels really beautiful to see you stepping into this role in this significant way. And we're here to support you as the BioFi project, as Applied Alchemy, as whatever it is, into stepping into this next vision with the Salmon Nation collabs, and also in some of the collaborations that you're doing with the Okanagan. So I'm excited to see it unfolding and excited to be a part of it. And I'd love to hear pieces from others as they see it touches them. And yeah, let's bring it all together.
Mm.
Thanks, Edward. And I should say too that Pearl is here, who you heard from a minute ago. She's one of my key collaborators in the Okanagan project as well. So I was so happy to see her pop up here.
I see a hand from Indy and Pearl. We're also happy to hear from you if you want to come in after Indy. Indy, I think you're on mute.
Thank you guys. So I just attended the big conference this past week, which is about basic income, a guarantee of basic income, and all these different pilots happening all across the country. And I brought up eco restorations, and one of the places that somebody got really excited about was in Oregon, in Portland, where there's a lot of people getting chunks of money monthly. And as you were sharing this, Cheryl, I imagined the stewards who are doing the great work, the communities that are doing the actual work, how they can receive some of these monthly this monthly money for their stewardship. And I presented it a little bit. I didn't like do an official presentation, but I kind of was poking people with it, and a lot of people were curious and more interested in that, in creating some basic income pilots around stewardship, eco stewardship, as well as regenerative farming. So that might be something, Cheryl, to contemplate, is actually remunerating and creating pilots that can pay the people who do the work on the ground, who actually do the physical work. So, and if you want to connect on that more, I can loop you in with people that can support.
Love that. Thank you. Yeah. Eco credits for regenerative services is a huge piece of things to explore. Yeah, because absolutely, like, land stewards are providing these services for the watershed and should be compensated, so that in particular, like, food prices don't get passed on to the consumer, that like regenerative food should be affordable.
Mm.
And yeah, I really want to explore that more, because that's part of like the sort of financial solution and all of this. So yeah, I would love to be connected. Like I'm hoping to like, what we could do is find a partner who's willing to journey with us, because, we don't have some sort of big eco credit deal, but it's like, we might get there, and how do we kind of learn with each other of how do you aggregate, a group of smaller land stewards together into something bigger, and how do we kind of help on-ramp people and learn from each other to do that.
Totally. Yeah, Cheryl, we should definitely talk more about this. The BioFi project is exploring a couple of stewardship eco credit projects right now, and I think Will Gardner from Regen Network is on the call, and Regen Network has been running a pilot in Charamansa and the Amazon to develop biocultural stewardship credits. And yeah, we're really interested in bringing together consortiums of buyers to buy credits from across a bioregion. So as a community, let's work on that together.
Yeah.
Pearl, we'd love to hear from you. And then I see Carrie has her hand up.
Sure. Thanks for that great presentation, Cheryl. It's always so interesting to hear you speak. And what I might add to just what she was saying was really inspired Samantha by all these new ideas for biocultural stewardship credits and these kinds of things. Traditionally in our bioregion, and I live in this bioregion of the Okanagan, is that Indigenous people have largely been dependent on government grants. And this is just how it flows. And this is also keeps them in a type of funding relationship that hasn't always served the regeneration and the uplifting of alternative cultural knowledge and traditional ecological systems. So we've kind of labeled it as a rematriation. I work in rematriation as a story alongside our work at Kindle Project with flow funding of Indigenous women. So me and Cheryl were like geeking out on what would it mean to rematriate a bioregion, and how juicy that would be to actually center Indigenous cultural knowledge as like the forefront of this, rather than an external ideas coming in and putting them into a bioregion, but rather taking it from the ground up. So we're just sort of taking time right now to explore those relationships, get to know people, build trust, learn a new dialogue and a new way of seeing a bioregion, and also the uplifting of Indigenous care, especially of women in particular, to lead that based on their thousands and thousands of years of being in harmony with our bioregion. So how do we not appropriate that, but how do we uplift it, fund it, just build more of these great ideas that we're learning from this call? So thanks so much. Any advice, wisdom is much appreciated.
Oh, I think you shared a lot of wisdom right there. Thank you, Pearl. So many beautiful provocations that we'll continue to explore together. Carrie, over to you.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm in the South Coast bioregion. So if there are any folks situated around these parts, otherwise known as Greater Los Angeles, please reach out to me. I have more of a meta observation or comment or question, but I'm so grateful for both of the presentations from Greg and Cheryl, and the beautiful detail that you're bringing forth, which relates to my question, which is, as I'm part of a number of these communities, they're doing this work, and so grateful to be learning so much. What I notice is that my learning is quickening now, and that feels very exciting. And so, I'm thinking about this question of how do we transcend and include, to borrow the language of spiral dynamics and Ken Wilber, meaning, like, how do we, without culturally appropriating, right, or without appropriating. So how do we take all the amazing work that Cheryl's been doing in Salmon Nation? How do we take all how do we gather the ideas from all the work that's already happening, and not, continue to sort of reinvent the wheel, but rather borrow and bake in and then grow and then keep ascending? And so that's just something that's really on my mind, because I do feel that there's tremendous momentum, and I don't want to steal other people's ideas, and I don't want to, kind of keep starting from scratch. So anyway, just something, I don't expect necessarily an answer, but I think it's wonderful to kind of think about the possibilities for accelerating the evolution of the movement.
Cheryl, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I think it's calls like this. And I'm a big believer in also the kind of continuity of in-person to online and back again as well, and how we can be doing that. And also, how we can go deep into places too. Like, I think sometimes they're called learning journeys as well, but how can we kind of bring different people together to go deep into a certain place, and many places maybe together, to cross-pollinate ideas and to bring fresh new perspectives, and to learn about what's working in a particular watershed. And so I don't know, I feel like between those three, if yeah, we can sort of get into a rhythm of doing those as a community, would be really, really special.
I agree. That's, exactly what this community is trying to do, is to surface all the amazing innovation happening at the edges, and share challenges, and share best practices, and share what rematriation looks like in practice, and to learn out loud together. And I think this is new territory for many of us, if not all of us. We've got David Hankey here, who's been doing this for at least 45 years, but most of the rest of us are a little bit newer to this work. And so, yeah, just like having the courage to ask the questions together, is what we're wanting to create in this BioFi community. And with that, it looks like we're almost to the top of the hour. Tyler, do you want to close us out or transition us to the free discussion?
I do. Yes, I think I'd love just to give Cheryl and Greg a chance to say any last words or any last requests. But before I hand it over there, just want to put in a reminder, and I'll plot this all in the chat, that the conversation continues on Hilo as always. We'll be there. People are self-organizing calls. There's a link to the calendar in this post as well, that you can see all the upcoming calls. So hope that's a helpful resource. And then, yeah, after we hear from Cheryl and Greg, just saying goodbye, I'll be holding the space open. And so we'll see who wants to, if we break out into different groups or just hold a collective conversation. There's no pressure to stay, but we don't want to cut anything short that wants to grow. So yeah, thank you all for being here. And I'll toss it to Cheryl and then maybe back to Greg. And I see Edward. Do you want to?
I was just going to say thank you. Thank you. That's all.
Yeah. Yeah, I just want to say thank you too. Like, especially starting out a new thing as you're sitting by yourself in your home office can feel daunting and like, what am I doing? So this is a wonderful way to start out the day with such a awesome community of support and feedback. So I'm looking forward to other opportunities we get to connect. So thanks so much.
And I'll just add as well, thank you. And also just, I guess, how amazing it is that this field is kind of emerging. It feels like many of us have been working on our own and feeling this kind of calling, and that there's this kind of lever that needs to be worked on, perhaps coming out of failures working in the mainstream economic systems, like, but yeah, so it's thanks to the leadership of the team here for pulling us all together and helping to shape the field.
And one final thing I'll add is I think for folks that are specifically interested in working on bioregional venture studios, let's create a thread, a post in the Hilo group where we can all find each other and, continue to update and ask questions together and have this discussion. So this field building call was obviously focused on venture studios. We'll see what other projects want to be presented in the future, and we'll probably talk about some other bioregional financing facilities. But I think the venture studio is a really exciting place for many bioregions to start. Awesome. Over to you, Tyler.
Lovely. Okay. Well, if you're hopping off, feel free to unmute and just say goodbye or a word of thanks. Those of us hanging out, we'll get started in a couple minutes.
Thank you so much
Thank you
for
so
your
much.
effort and your time.
Thank you, Tyler. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you, Greg. Thank you, everybody, for attending who did. Looking forward to this journey with all of you.